What if I told you that some of the voices carved into country music's Mount Rushmore were once tossed aside like demo tapes? Legends we still celebrate were, at one point, shown the door by anxious executives, blindsided by tabloid storms, creative clashes, or the simple fact that fashions move faster than a steel guitar lick. Tonight we're stepping inside those boardrooms and backroom bars to uncover why 21 icons got the boot, and how exile sometimes builds a bigger myth than an entire marketing department ever could. The saga opens with Johnny Paycheck, a man whose sandpaper growl sold outlaw rebellion to millions. Paycheck's legal rap sheet eventually outpaced his chart run. Bar fights, assault allegations, and a notorious moment where he almost pulled a trigger in an Ohio honky-tonk forced Epic Records to weigh court dates against radio spins. The suits chose safety. They cashed him out and hoped the headlines would fade. Paycheck roared back later with prison tales that made him sound even more authentic, but the label never saw a dime of that redemption. If Paycheck was chaos personified, David Allan Coe looked like a walking controversy in rhinestones. His lyrics flirted with racial taboos, prison folklore, and verses about hard time and harder substances. Columbia loved the cult aura until affiliates threatened boycotts. One awkward shareholder call later, Coe found himself holding a severance envelope. He shrugged, cut a live album from a biker bar, and kept driving his hearse black Cadillac across the outlaw circuit, proof that being too raw for radio can still sell out roadhouses from Florida to Montana. Billy Joe Shaver wrote outlaw anthems for Waylon and Willie, but his own records never climbed high enough for accounting departments. When a fistfight with a label executive left someone sporting a memorable shiner, patience evaporated. Contracts expired quietly and Shaver went back to songwriting, penning gems that outlived every marketing campaign. Sometimes the storyteller survives even when the star package falls apart. Rough edges aren't the only sin in Nashville. Ferlin Husky was once the epitome of gentleman crooning, selling millions with satin-smooth melodies. Then the outlaw wave hit, and executives declared his Polish outdated. He woke up one morning in the 70s to find his services no longer required. Husky kept touring state fairs, reminding loyal fans that trends don't cancel class. Sammy Smith learned how brutal expectations can be. After Help Me Make It Through the Night lit up every jukebox, labels wanted lightning twice. Successive singles stalled, programmers shrugged, and executives blamed her for not topping her own mountain. One by one, they let her walk. Smith never chased the spotlight again. She preferred smoky clubs and artistic freedom to boardroom pressure. Bobby Bare's folk-tinged storytelling was a critic's darling, but by the late 70s, RCA hunted polished crossover acts. Bare's earthy sound no longer matched the template: a polite meeting, a handshake, and his contract dissolved. Ironically, his later independent releases inspired the Americana movement labels now chase. Wynn Stewart helped invent the Bakersfield sound that fueled Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, yet Capitol pivoted toward sweeter production once Nashville strings proved more profitable. Stewart's chart numbers dipped, and executives pulled the plug. His influence, however, drilled into every Telecaster twang that followed. Speaking of influence, Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard weren't immune to the axe either. After years of blockbuster runs, they sparred with management over creative control, just as sales cooled. RCA finally said enough, trimming budgets and eventually distancing from Jennings. Capitol nudged Haggard out in a similar cost-cutting sweep. Both men rode off with defiant new deals, reminding the industry that legends negotiate on their own terms. Jerry Lee Lewis had already survived rock and roll scandal when he reinvented himself as a country hitmaker. But old habits die hard. Reports of no-shows, fiery backstage rants, and one too many empty whiskey bottles convinced more than one label to terminate partnerships. Lewis simply pounded the piano harder, convincing fans that danger belonged in the music. George Jones earned the nickname No-Show Jones for skipping concerts after nights lost in a blur of bourbon and pills. Musicor and later Epic tried interventions, but missed dates bled cash. Eventually, they cut him loose, betting audiences would tire of the drama. They misjudged how much country fans adore a redemption arc. Jones's comeback albums later sold in droves. Stonewall Jackson and Hank Snow were Grand Ole Opry pillars, but by the late 70s, their traditional twang sounded antique beside the urban cowboy boom. Columbia and RCA quietly shelved new projects, focusing on younger acts with disco-tinged beats. The veterans kept playing theaters, proving you can't erase decades of loyalty with a single memo. Trend whiplash hit Charlie Rich after he drifted toward pop-leaning ballads. When radio wavered and he famously torched John Denver's CMA envelope on live TV, Epic figured his unpredictability outweighed his talent. They shut the door and Rich faded into semi-retirement, nursing a glass and a grudge. Tanya Tucker's teenage prodigy aura morphed into adult tabloid magnetism. Mid-80s headlines screamed about romances, rehab, and rumored lines of coke backstage. Capitol's risk managers panicked, concluding the press sizzle burned hotter than her latest singles. Tucker took a pause, returned sober, and earned her greatest critical acclaim, vindicating herself without their backing. Clean reputations could suffer too. Johnny Horton's early singles sputtered, and Mercury dropped him months before. The Battle of New Orleans exploded on Columbia. The lesson? Timing is everything, and sometimes the first label misses the gold rush buried inside a restless artist. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter who sang fearless songs about birth control and double standards, found herself adrift in the glossy 90s. MCA wanted pop country ballads, not gritty anthems about real life. When sales slowed, they deemed her catalog too risky and let the contract lapse. She later partnered with rocker Jack White for a Grammy-winning return, proving authenticity never ages. Kitty Wells, once crowned the queen of country music, discovered royalty doesn't guarantee eternal radio spins. As the genre courted crossover youth, Decca released her quietly, prioritizing new teen acts. Wells kept touring churches and halls, revered by generations who knew who blazed the trail. Patsy Cline's case is perhaps the greatest "what were they thinking" moment. Her first label, 4-Star, failed to see her crossover power and ended the relationship just before Crazy turned her into an eternal icon under Decca. It stands as a masterclass in short-sighted risk aversion. Porter Wagoner, famed for rhinestone suits and as Dolly Parton's on-screen mentor, watched his solo record stall in the early 80s. RCA decided glitz no longer guaranteed sales and quietly severed ties. Wagner returned to the Opry stage where rhinestones still sparkled under house lights even if radio ignored him. Johnny Cash's downfall shocked everyone. After decades with Columbia, shifting tastes and lukewarm singles convinced executives in 1986 that the Man in Black was finished. They underestimated the hunger for sincerity. Cash's later American recordings, cut with just a guitar and raw voice, outsold anything the label had imagined, a stinging reminder that hearts, not spreadsheets, choose legends. Take George Jones, for instance. By the early 80s, his reputation for missing gigs was so notorious that some venues printed "appearance subject to no-show Jones feeling like it" in microscopic type on the tickets. Epic executives fielded weekly calls from promoters demanding refunds. One vice president, half joking in a leaked memo, calculated that if Jones simply arrived on time for every booking, they could fund an entire new artist roster. Ultimately, the label's accountants decided cutting him was cheaper than praying for punctuality. Jones answered with a Grammy. Jerry Lee's path was messier. Smash Records tolerated his nightly sermons at the altar of bourbon as long as singles climbed. When the hits slowed, executives circulated a secret rider demanding promoters lock away all liquor backstage. The killer reacted by sneaking in bottles inside his piano bench. At one festival, he pounded the keys so hard a hidden fifth shattered, spraying glass and whiskey across the stage. The moment went viral in the pre-internet sense, and Smash folded the partnership within a week. Some exits were heartbreakingly quiet. Stonewall Jackson watched the charts migrate toward glossy urban sounds while he preserved honky-tonk tradition. Columbia invited him to one final strategy meeting, complete with pastries and a polite farewell. Jackson nodded, pocketed his reduced royalty check, and drove back to the Opry where the backstage coffee pot was older than half the new acts. He never charted again, but every Friday night the pews of Ryman cheered him like nothing had changed since 1962. Hank Snow's slide was thawed slowly by time. RCA executives appreciated his mastery, yet felt younger singers looked better on color television. They promised a grand anniversary package, then replaced it with a hits compilation padded by karaoke-style overdubs. When Snow objected, they suggested a mutual parting. He responded by financing his own sessions in Canada, pressing vinyl on a boutique imprint, and selling them out of the trunk of a tour bus that already had 1,000,000 miles on the odometer. A decade later, those self-made records became collector gold. Porter Wagoner's dismissal carried a different sting. After years of introducing Dolly to living room audiences, he believed RCA would honor him with a lifetime seat at the table. Instead, they allocated his budget to an emerging heartthrob who never lasted 2 albums. Wagner went home, opened the glitter-filled suitcases he'd once lugged through airport terminals, and felt disappointment heavier than the rhinestones. Then he called a local video crew, staged a shoestring TV special from the Opry parking lot, and sold the broadcast to regional stations. It rated higher than several primetime dramas. Kitty Wells, long hailed as the first woman to headline arenas, heard about her dismissal through a junior publicist who mispronounced her name. She laughed then, a sharp sound that cut through decades of etiquette, and reminded the youngster that the only reason women could headline anything was because she had endured radio boycotts back when mentioning birth control on a record could start a church riot. Wells organized a farewell tour that sold out before tickets officially hit the box office, proving the marketplace still honored its pioneers even if corporations did not. Then there is the astonishing case of Patsy Cline. 4-Star Records believed her appeal was limited to regional jukebox circuits and refused to fund a full orchestra for her sessions. Fed up, Cline sawed through her contract loophole by recording Walkin' After Midnight for a television talent show. The performance exploded nationwide, and Decca pounced. Years later, the executives who once argued her voice was too sophisticated for rural audiences proudly framed reissues of greatest hits compilations in their lobbies. Loretta Lynn faced a quieter dismissal, but no less painful. MCA's board pivoted toward power ballads aimed at suburban malls, and the coal country narratives were deemed old-fashioned. Meetings ended with polite platitudes about shifting demographics. Loretta packed up and retreated to Butcher Hollow, where she wrote songs about faded contracts, aging, and the dignified rage of women told they've aged out. Those very songs, cut later with a garage rock producer, earned her the most rapturous reviews of her career. Even the defiant Waylon Jennings found himself on the wrong side of a balance sheet. In the mid-'80s, RCA's new leadership embraced slick drum machines and satin jackets. Waylon's leather vest and anti-corporate anthems sounded like a hostile takeover. After one especially tense meeting, he lit a cigarette beneath a no-smoking sign, exhaled slowly, and told them to do what they had to do. They did. He spent the next year touring relentlessly, funding sessions from merch money and cutting raw tracks that frightened polite radio but thrilled fans. Nashville came crawling back, and RCA paid triple the advance Waylon originally requested. Corporate memory can be short, but fan memory lasts. The same organizations that dumped George Jones would later spend fortunes marketing artists who tried, and usually failed, to imitate his tortured rasp. Executives who shelved Porter Wagoner eventually bankrolled retro movements that worshipped his nudie suits. They let Patsy Cline walk, only to reissue her catalog endlessly once the world realized how celestial those vocals were. So what does all this mean for the stars lighting up today's playlists? Algorithms replace jukeboxes, but the equation remains. Image plus numbers equals investment. The minute either slips, even the most streamed voice can find an email waiting that starts with, "We regret to inform you." The question isn't whether someone will be cut loose, it's who and how they'll handle the fall. Will they vanish into small-town bars, or will they craft a comeback that makes the first act look like a warm-up? Country music loves a comeback almost as much as it loves a good heartbreak. The heartbreak, in this case, belongs to the suits who thought short-term. Dropping Johnny Cash cost Columbia the chance to release Hurt, a recording that still racks up millions of streams every year. Firing Merle Haggard meant missing Big City, an anthem that reinvigorated his catalog. Dismissing Tanya Tucker didn't stop her. It positioned her to return with Grammy-nominated grit. Every miscalculation proves that authenticity compounds interest. And there lies the secret Nashville hardly ever advertises. Labels are caretakers, not creators, of legacy. When they misjudge, the artist's story doesn't freeze, it breaks free. Fans follow the music, not the logo stamped on the sleeve. Sometimes the ugliest corporate endings lead to the purest artistic rebirths. Picture a dusty highway stretching beyond the city limits. On one side sits the gleaming headquarters loaded with legal teams, analytics, and nervous shareholders. On the other stands a roadside honky-tonk glowing neon at midnight. Inside, a fired legend plugs in a weathered Telecaster. Maybe sings a little rougher than yesterday. Maybe forgets a lyric but grins through it. The crowd raises cheap beer in plastic cups because they're not buying perfection, they're buying truth. In that instant, the dismissal that once looked like professional ruin transforms into the greatest plot twist a songwriter could dream. So remember these 21 cautionary tales the next time streaming algorithms crown a flavor of the week superstar. The industry may decide when a contract ends, but it never determines when a legacy ends. Sometimes the biggest career move is getting dropped, and sometimes the only thing more thrilling than watching a star rise is watching them get kicked off the mountain, dust themselves off, and climb higher with no safety net. In the 21st century landscape, the scenery looks different, yet the plot feels familiar. TikTok counts and playlist ads have replaced jukebox spins, but executives still chase metrics, not longevity. One viral clip can launch an unknown from a bedroom microphone to a multi-million stream contract, yet the same algorithm that crowned them can bury them beneath tomorrow's trend. When that happens, the boardroom phrase market correction echoes the past's brusque dismissal letters. Picture a hotshot whose debut explodes when users turn the chorus into a dance meme, labels stampede, advances rain down, managers demand a clone of the first hit. Lightning, however, refuses to strike twice on command. 2 releases later, the numbers sag, meetings grow tense, budgets tighten, and the same artist who boasted about owning the moment finds tour support evaporating. The language of the emails changes, but it rhymes with every story we just heard. That revolving door is why the legend's cautionary tales remain essential. Career insurance is not written in contracts. It is written in grit, craftsmanship, and the kind of live show that survives without pyrotechnics. Johnny Cash beat algorithmic oblivion by stripping everything down to 6 steel strings and the truth. Tanya Tucker conquered tabloid fatigue with songs too honest to ignore. Even George Jones, drifting through haze, still outran the accountants because his voice made pain sound holy. So if you're an aspiring artist watching this, breathe before trading your masters for playlist placement. Build a community that will stand beside you when the wind changes. Write songs sturdy enough to fill a VFW hall when the radio turns silent. And listeners, remember that your streams, ticket stubs, and bar napkin requests wield more power than you think. The next time a corporation declares an icon obsolete, the audience can vote otherwise with its headphones and its wallets, because somewhere down a neon-lit highway a future legend is coaxing feedback from a borrowed amp, turning rejection into an opening verse. Your applause, tonight, or on some late-night stream, might be the spark that fuels their comeback saga. Stand close, listen hard, and you could witness the moment Exile becomes the launch pad for greatness. History shows it only takes one chorus, one raw confession caught on tape, to swing momentum back toward the artist. That possibility is why we keep listening, why stories of dismissal fascinate us, and why hope keeps dancing through every melody.